So we have talked a lot about, and this is, we talked a lot about a bunch of different types of emerging technology, and I learned a lot of really interesting stuff. And 5G got mentioned quite a bit. And I wanted to take some time, and I looked over what all was going to be covered when I sent them my topic, and actually waited until fairly late, which I think might explain why there were a couple of snafus. We're not talking about content, although we will touch on content, but really about hardware and what that means for you and what it means for how you should be thinking about developing, how you should be thinking about what you are creating to service your clients and customers, and as a client or customer, what you should be thinking about as you're having conversations with your vendors. Hopefully that covers most people in this room. I know there are some students here who are here at the Expo, and hopefully this gives them something to chew on as well. So if people who know me know that I mostly detest slides. So my slides will be available. We're going to spend a solid 10 minutes on this one. So take a picture if you want to. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do and why Verizon 5G Labs has been sponsoring this. And I've gotten up here a couple of times and I've talked about how we're sponsoring it because we're looking for the next big thing, right? We're looking for the next big idea. We're looking for new ways to use technology to take advantage of 5G that, to be honest, people have said it up here several times, the killer app, right? What is the killer app? What's the app that no one's ever thought of, no one's ever seen before? Now you have to ask yourself, what was the last killer app? What was the last application where you were like, no shit? Maybe Snapchat that like brought augmented reality like into your hands. But I mean, there have been, as we talked about earlier today, there's been advances in people. We've seen VR and AR applications going back to the 1800s, right? And the reason that Verizon and the 5G Labs team, which is the team that I'm on, the reason that we're here is quite literally because we need help. Our job, my job, quite literally, is to predict the future. Because 5G represents such a fundamental shift in the way that we think about connectivity, in the way that we think about machines talking to each other, in the way that we think about humans interacting with those machines, as we've seen here today, that we know change is coming, right? We know that 5G, and I've said it before up here, it's coming like a freight train. There is no stopping it. It's in the news constantly. For some of you out there, it's already on your phone. It says 5GE, which is something different. We can talk about that. But we are trying to think critically about consumer applications and use cases, about industrial applications and use cases, about moonshot applications and use cases, stuff that we have never really thought of before. Not because it's some killer app that's going to make $1 billion, but because it represents a change. It represents a shift in the way that we interact with each other and the world. I was thinking about, so I left my hotel today. One of the things that I really like to do is explore. I recently moved neighborhoods. Anybody here live in New York City? Anybody in Brooklyn? Nice. What neighborhood? Sunset Park. Nice. I just moved to Carroll Gardens off the F. Sunset Park is great. Industry City. I'm going to take some cooking classes down there. They're really good. So I just moved to a new neighborhood. One of my favorite things about moving to a new neighborhood is discovery, right? Is learning about all of the little nuances. What are the coffee shops? What are the ways that I can get to work? And so I left my hotel today, and I could have very easily gotten a coffee at the hotel. And I knew I could have very easily gotten a coffee here, but I wanted to go and explore a little bit. And how many of you do this? When you are in a new city and you're trying to find something, you're doing this. Right? You're not actually exploring. You're following the thing on your phone and hoping that you're calibrated enough to where the dot is pointing you in the right direction. And so I started thinking again as I was walking to my coffee shop, trying to do that, but also trying to put it down. Like, when AR and VR see mass adoption, what is it going to mean for the way that we explore? What is it going to mean for the way that we start finding new places and new things? Yes, it'll aid in things like product discovery. And we've seen how it can have retail applications and healthcare applications. That's great, but what about exploring, and what about finding new things? What's it going to do to that? I was thinking about what if Lewis and Clark had AR? It'd be a boring trip. That's not what I'm ever talking about. So We know that 5G is going to change things. We know that we need to be able to predict the future because if we don't, we're going to get lost in the shuffle. Why do we know that? Because it's happened before. This is a slide. Don't look at the slide. What was 1G? You got to speak up. Calling, yeah. Phones, yeah. The ability to make a phone call over the air. 2G. Texting. Yeah, texting with your thumbs. Did you guys know that BlackBerry had to teach executives how to use thumb tapping because every time that they would show a BlackBerry device, they would try to like type on it with their hands like this, swear to God. And they'd be like, no, dog, like it's thumbs. Right? The way that we do this every single day and pioneer about BlackBerry. We're going to talk a little bit more about BlackBerry. 3G, what was that? Basically like sending a selfie to your boo. Like that's pretty much it. The beginnings of data transfer. And then 4G was streaming video, persistent connectivity, and things like that. So let's go back for a little bit of a history lesson because in order to understand where we're going, you really have to think critically about where we've been. So, Steve Jobs, he stood up on a stage and he said, one more thing. When was that? What year? 7. There we go. Yep, exactly. 2007, he said, it's an iPod that you can make a phone call with. And everyone lost their minds, right? Because no one had ever seen this before. This was a shift. It was a revolution in user interface technology that no one had seen, right? And everyone went nuts. But there was 2 things that the phone could do that no phone had been able to do before that people didn't really write about that day. It could download large files from the internet, and it had a full web browser. Up until that point, like we said, BlackBerry had been king. And BlackBerry, their value proposition, their bread and butter was that they worked well with the networks because they were so resource constrained is not the right word. They demanded so few resources from the networks loved BlackBerries. And so they threw them out to their customers and they gave them all these incentives to buy them. And BlackBerries were sitting nice and happy because they demanded so few resources from the network. They actually purchased a company called Torch that their job was to help BlackBerry strip all the fun out of the internet. All the images, all the videos, everything that we use it for now, BlackBerry said, nope, not going to do it. And everybody was happy. People bought them and bought them and bought them and bought them. And the reason is because the networks didn't allow them to have any fun in the internet and didn't allow them to be able to download those large files because they said, it'll crash our networks. It'll crash our network. And then here's the iPhone, which can do these 2 things that BlackBerry had wanted to do for years. And BlackBerry screamed bloody murder. They said, it's going to crash the network. You always told us that we couldn't do this, and now you all of a sudden you have this iPhone that can do this. It's going to crash the network. And do you know what it did? Crash the network every single day. It crashed the network constantly. Anybody have an iPhone 1? Yeah, no, it was kind of a miserable experience. And it was the network connectivity in 3G was not there to support it because they were still on 3G. And when they took it apart, all the competitors, they took it apart, they found out that iPhone had a Mac processor in it. It was a massive processor that was just hungry for all of this data. And not only that, it was hungry for all this power. Right? The iPhone that back then, yeah, it looked like this. It certainly wasn't this thin. It didn't have this form factor. But it looked a lot like this because the thing was like 80% battery, right? Remember how long it lasted? Like 8 hours on standby. Yeah. And so it was this weird experience that confounded all the other competitors, even the folks at BlackBerry. One of the reasons that they ended up going the way that they did was because they refused to change because they said, there's no way the public is going to accept this. And you know what we did? We accepted it, hook, line, and sinker. The user experience, we'll deal with it. This is beautiful, right? And then Apple opened up its developer community because at the very beginning, all you had was the, quote unquote, it's not really bloatware, but it was the pre-install applications. You used the calendar that Apple told you to use, and to some extent we still do. And they opened it up to developers, and they said, we want you to help us create. Apple was one of the first people who did that. We want you to help us create. And the developers who decided to begin developing, and no one did it full time back then, they were constrained by what? The network. 3G. Because 4G wasn't there yet. When did 4G come out? Anybody else? Close, 2010. December 2010. You were like right there. Like if I had prizes like candy, like you would totally get one. 2010, then 4G was released by the carriers. And then they were hurried because the developers and the iPhone users were clamoring for more network capacity because up until then they didn't have it. And all of the rest of the carriers were seeing what was happening on AT&T's network. And they were trying as best they could. They saw what was happening, and so they said 4G has to be here, and so it was here. And so the carriers, they created the 4G network, and they put it out there, and they said, here you go, world. Have fun. And then all the people that we talked about earlier today, Mark Zuckerberg, and Steve Jobs, and Jeff Bezos, and Reed Hastings, they said, wait a second. Do you mean that I can have persistent app connectivity to all of my customers, no matter where they are, and I can stream them video at the same time? Cool. And they built companies, and they built empires, and they built industries, and they built entire economies on the back of 4G. Anybody take an Uber today? Or a Lyft? Do a car share? You can't really do that on 3G. Anybody make a FaceTime call today? No? Anybody made a FaceTime call in the past week with someone in a different country? Yeah. Try doing that on 3G. It doesn't work. When's the last time your phone went into 3G? What happened? Paperweight. Right? And so we live our lives in this 4G world that was built on the back of 4G. And we didn't even think about that. There was no killer app. There was no killer moment. And all those pioneers, all those titans of industry that I mentioned before, they made trillions of dollars, and they took a leadership position saying, this is the way that we are going to live our lives. This is the way that we are going to live and work and play. And you know who didn't? Carriers. We sure didn't. We built these pipes. Somebody earlier today, the Qualcomm guys, referred to them as pipes. That's how I like to describe them. Except I work in a co-working space that has exposed piping, and one time I was referring to them as pipes, and I do have a 5G test network at our lab in Manhattan, and someone looked up at the pipe that carries fire water, and they said, is that the 5G pipe? And I said, no, it's not the 5G pipe. Swear to God. Swear that happened. So now I stopped using pipes, and I use highways, right? If 3G was like a 2-lane highway, 4G is like a 20-lane highway, and then 5G is like a 100-lane highway with almost zero latency, and the Qualcomm guys talked about that too. So here we are. We're in this 4G world, living in a life that's built on 4G, where the carriers, the people who made all of that possible, didn't really take that leadership stance, and therefore did not benefit from it in a way that they could have. And so as carriers and as Verizon, we've seen that there are a lot of properties that 5G brings to the table, right? And we know that all of this stuff is possible. And it's possible because of what we describe as these 8 currencies of 5G. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to go back to that if you need me to. These are the properties of 5G, right? Some of them make sense. Some of them you're like, what? But they're mostly easy to make sense of, and you can start to wrap your head around them and start to think about how this is going to impact the evolution of technology moving forward. Now, how do people talk about how it impacts technology moving forward? When you hear about 5G, usually it's one of 2 different types of use cases. Can anybody think of the first one? With 5G, you can download a movie in 6 seconds. I swear to God, that's it, right? You can download a movie in 6 seconds. When's the last time you downloaded a movie to your phone? No, before a flight, maybe? Yeah, exactly, because that's the only time you ever do it, because we stream. Nobody's downloading movies to the phone, but you know why we talk about it that way? Because everyone remembers LimeWire. Everyone remembers Napster. Everyone remembers trying to download a song or an album or, God forbid, a movie that turns out it ends up being grainy and you spent like 3 hours waiting for nothing, right? Everyone remembers that, pulling your hair out. And so when we say you can download a movie in 6 seconds, oh, it's 4K, oh, it's the Avengers, it's 3 hours long. Everyone's like, whoa, that's fast. What does that mean for your lives, though? Nothing, right? What's the other one? The other use cases. With 5G, you can do... Anybody? We're getting there, but the use case that they say is you can do remote robotic surgery. Let me get this straight. I can download a movie in 6 seconds. Or I can do remote robotic surgery. Fantastic. What does that mean for how we're actually going to live our lives and develop new technologies and new applications on 5G? And my own company is guilty of this. We talk about it in this way because it helps people go, oh yeah, I get that. That seems like impossible. I don't even know how we would do that, right? But there's no in between. There doesn't actually send a message to the people like you, the people in this room, who are thinking about how do we develop on top of this? How do we start creating solutions about that, right? And so let's use that healthcare example, right? Here's how we might actually get there, okay? Remote robotic surgery is one thing, but how can 5G be used today? Anybody sticking around here tomorrow for the sessions tomorrow? Highly recommend it. In this particular room, there's going to be a session by a guy named Steve Feiner from Columbia, one of the smartest guys I know. And we've worked with him in our lab in Manhattan to show how collaborative distributed VR can be used in physical therapy. How a person with a shoulder injury can have a headset on and have the handles, and there can be a physical therapist not located in that room, in that space, in that city, in that country, and can be running an application, and I won't spoil it, you'll see the application tomorrow if you're here for his talk, and you should be, that can run that patient through shoulder motions to rehabilitate the shoulder. We have demonstrated that with Dr. Feiner. So there's a way that 5G can do telehealth and telemedicine. What's the next step? Are we there at remote robotic surgery yet? Maybe not. What about a surgeon who is new, who is operating on someone for the first time? Spleen removal. I don't know why I chose spleen. Spleen removal. And this doctor doesn't necessarily know what he's doing, and he doesn't hopefully he knows something about what he's doing, but he's not an expert, he's training, right? He's a resident. And this particular doctor has a 4K 360 camera mounted on his person or somewhere close by. And the feed from that 360 4K camera is going to a more experienced surgeon over Mount Sinai. And she has on a VR headset, and she can see everything that camera sees, which hopefully is everything that other surgeon sees. And she's able to have an interface and take a pen and start showing where a suture should be, or an incision should be, to start showing, hey, look at this right here, be sure you take care of this, or be sure you make note of this, doctor speak. That particular doctor, the one who isn't quite as adept as the other one, he's wearing an AR interface where he can see exactly where these lines are. He can see exactly where that other more experienced doctor is helping him. So now we're at VR rehab, remote assistive surgery. Now we can start wrapping our heads around what might remote robotic surgery look like. It's these properties that help us get there. Now, in my opinion, I think that 5G is actually kind of boring. Don't tell anybody I said that. Don't you tweet that. I think 5G is kind of boring by itself, right? High speed, low latency, service deployment time, 90 minutes. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what that means. 99.999% reliability. Yeah, it is. Software-defined networks. Yeah. The real power of 5G and the way that you should be thinking about 5G is not that 5G is going to be your magic bullet, not that 5G is going to enable the data transfer between visual headsets and some hub device. The way you should think about 5G is what are all the other technologies it's going to enable? Who said edge computing in the back? Thought somebody did. Okay, we're going to hang out afterward. One of the interesting things that 5G enables is edge computing. Has anyone heard of edge computing before? Anybody know what it is? Any edge computer experts in here? Okay. He said, yeah. Edge computing is the idea that we can take supercomputers and we can put them at the edge of the network. Now, where's the edge of the network? Your phone right now is a wireless phone, right? It has a wireless connection to a radio somewhere. Right? If we were to walk outside, I can probably start looking at rooftops and I can point to you where this 4G radio is. Everything else behind that, fire. Everything else, all the backhaul, we call it, is fiber. It's not wireless. It's all fiber. And in the older networks, it's copper as well. We're moving to an all-fiber 5G core, and we've invested a lot of money in that. So the way that we've started to think about these cloud revolutions is that you can take the data that was previously crunched on this phone, and remember the iPhone 1, the giant Mac processor with the giant battery to keep it running to prevent it from dying in a couple of hours. And we started to offload some of that compute into the cloud. We've talked about that quite a bit today. And that's where you get streaming on Netflix. That's where you get storage on things like Dropbox. That's where you have all of these different things, all these different apps on your phone that are accessing data from somewhere else. They're accessing in the cloud, right? We all know that. But that has limitations. The cloud server farms, they can be very far away. And there's lots of fiber or copper that has to be traversed. And the idea is that there's a lot of applications that need to be put locally on your device in the first place. If you were to download a VR application, it takes a long time, right? Because you have to have all that information on the device itself because you can't stream it. Now, edge computing has been around for a while, and the idea is that we can take where all of those radios, where they collect their fiber before they go out into the core of the internet, is something that you've seen on the streets already. They're usually big green boxes, and you have to step around them when you cross the street, especially if you live in a place like New York. So you see them out there. Those belong to the telcos, or the city, and the telco rents them. And that is where all of these connections come into one before they go into big, giant, dark fiber cable and they go out into the core, right? And if you live on the eastern seaboard, the core is in Yonkers, New York. Anybody been to Yonkers? Not a whole lot there, except the internet. So the idea is with cloud computing is that you have to get the information from your device out to that edge node, out into the core access point, out into the greater internet where the cloud is, have it processed somewhere in, I don't know where, California, North Carolina, something like that, and then comes back to the device, and all of that is latency. Not only that, up until this point, we've been limited by the general speeds of 4G. Now, if you live in a dense urban environment, you can get pretty good speeds, but the average speed of 4G is like 40 megabytes a second. It's pretty good. It can get you an Uber, and it can get you a FaceTime with somebody who lives in England, but it's not going to get you a streaming collaborative VR experience, is it? So with edge computing, we're saying that we can take that node where all of those lines from the radios collect, and we can start putting common off-the-shelf hardware in there. We can start creating software-defined, near infinitely upgradable mesh supercomputers, and we can start processing that data, not locally, but right there on the edge. And when you do that, you enable a whole host of things. Why? Because this is no longer the hub that crunches those numbers. This is no longer the thing that has to be connected to because it has the processor. This becomes something that is just the recipient of a big, giant 5G highway of data that comes into your device. So what does this device have to do? Yeah, it's a dumb terminal. All it has to do is unpack the information and show it to you. This becomes something we call a thin client, right? Which I'm not actually even a fan of that word. I think it's misleading. This becomes something that can be something totally different because you don't need to have such a robust processor. And if you don't need such a robust processor, you certainly don't need that big, massive battery. So what does that mean? I think these devices are going to go the way of the key lime pie. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, because I know you're curious. Anybody ever had a deconstructed key lime pie? I don't know, it's like food with some assembly required. Like, I don't get it. Just give me the pie. What are the ways that we process information from this device? Sight, sound, touch, haptics. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But we've already today we've talked about glasses, true AR glasses that can shine beams of AR light onto your retina. It started with Intel and Project Vaunt. I'm sure there was some experimentation before that, but that's where it really started coming into the public eye. Project Vaunt got closed down, but there's others who are picking it up. Their very first presenter here, Soongi Park If you weren't here for his session, read his abstract, get in touch with him. He's doing some cool shit. So if you have glasses that all they need is a little processor and a little GPU to unpack already rendered information, then that means that those glasses don't necessarily need to be connected to anything at all. They need to be connected to the network. AirPods, we talked about that earlier today too. Those AirPods can also be connected to the network, processing information seamlessly with what you're seeing in those glasses, right? Haptics. People have Apple Watches. Now those are starting to connect to the network, which is really cool. But you can process information from vibrations. Anybody carry their phone in their pocket and you can tell by certain vibration patterns what sort of application is giving you a notification? What if you could then take that to the next step and start marrying that with something that you can hear or see at the same time? Then you start having this connected ecosystem of technology. And this connected ecosystem of personal technology is then connected to cities and communities and other things around you, to the point where you can be living your life and information is coming at you about the information about the world around you. So I know we're running out of time, and I know like I said, I am the thing between you and the pool party, which is exciting. VR in the pool. I have no idea. I'm really interested. I'm really curious to see. The reason that I am here, and like I said, we are the sponsor of this particular track today. And I'm not going to be here tomorrow, so please come find me today if you want to. The reason I'm here is because we are trying to usher in the fourth industrial revolution. We believe that it is a connected economy. We believe it is a connected society. And we believe that the realities of hardware are about to change. And the way that we think about hardware, the way that we think about providing value for the people that we are trying to take care of, whether they're our customers or our clients or our families, are going to change. And we want to be there to be part of it. Because we weren't there the last time. And look what happened. The whole world sprang up, and we just kind of watched it. So, 5G Lab, I promise I'm almost done. We work directly with startups and innovators. We are not experts in robotics. We're not experts in education technology. We're not experts in storytelling. But we're experts in 5G. We're experts in connectivity. So we can go out to those communities and we can say, hey, I'll come back to that. We can say, hey, educators, people who are exploring the boundaries of giving students access to these types of technologies, what would you do if you had 5G? First responders, how would you approach disaster scenarios? How would you keep people safe if you had 5G? Let's give you some funding. Let's give you some access. Let's figure it out together. And then let's go develop these into technologies that are real today that we can take to market together, right? And this is how we do it. This is who we work with. We have inputs, we have processes, we have outputs. My team, we work to ideate with larger customers and we say, what is it you need? Where are the drawbacks? Where are the bottlenecks that you're seeing in healthcare, in retail, in manufacturing, in stadiums, in storytelling, right? And then we create internal proofs of concept of where we see things like edge compute or computer vision or mixed reality actually delivering value. And we see if we can work on those together. And then we have technology enablers, a lot of the folks in this room who have ideas. If I only had better connectivity, if I only wasn't limited by hardware, what could you do? And we create new things together. And we start seeing how we can take those to market and start creating value. And this is the next. This is the reason. This is the iteration. This is the next iteration. This is what I'm excited about. Our Built on 5G challenge is not tied to any specific locale. Our robotics challenge was based in Boston. And it's technology agnostic. We're looking for ideas. We're looking for ideas in consumer technology. We're looking for ideas in industrial technology. And we're looking for moonshots. We're looking for stuff that we've never seen before that make us go, never would have thought of that. That is one of the cool things of my day, is that not only do I get to predict the future, but I get to be surprised. Because that sense of exploration, that sense of discovery doesn't leave. It happens every single day because people just like you in this room are making that happen. And we want to work with you. We want to help you create the next vision of technology in the area that you are an expert in, and we want to bring the resources, and we want to see what we can create together. I have a short video coming up after this. It's like 1 minute long. I'm going to stick around for a little while. I've had such a pleasure. I've had such a really good time being up here, talking to everyone today, talking with the speakers, talking with the attendees. Please come back and find me in the back. I'm going to show this quick video. I promise you it still gives me goosebumps. I've seen it like 50 times. But if you have an idea, and if you want to know more information about this particular program or any of the things that I've talked about already, I would love to talk to you. Oh, that's me. I forgot this was the buffer slide.
We've always been explorers, pilgrims, pioneers. Our curiosity urging us forward, seeking new lands, new ways, new ideas, the promise of new innovations, the infinite frontier before us.
Thank you.